Think about the last time you paid for something your partner could have figured out themselves. It felt like love, didn't it? Maybe it was, but there's a version of that same gesture that isn't love at all. That's just control wearing a generous face. And the terrifying part is, you might not be able to tell the difference from the inside. Most conversations about money in relationships focus on the person who earns more. Their sacrifice, their pressure, their resentment. What almost nobody examines is what happens to the person on the receiving end. Not what they gain, what they quietly lose. Because financial dependency in a relationship doesn't just shift the balance of power. It reshapes identity. It rewires ambition. And it does it so slowly, so gently, that the person it's happening to rarely notices until something breaks. This isn't about blame. It's about a structural dynamic that hurts both people in ways that are almost never talked about honestly. Let me start with the architecture of the problem, because the surface story, one person earns, one person doesn't, is almost never the real story. The real story is about what certainty does to the human brain. Psychologists and behavioral economists have studied this extensively. When the outcome is guaranteed, the drive to pursue it collapses. This isn't a character flaw, it's biology. The brain's motivational system is built around uncertainty and reward. Remove the uncertainty, and you remove a significant portion of the drive. When someone knows the bills are covered, when they know there's a safety net beneath every risk they might take, when the cost of failure has been effectively eliminated by their partner's income, the neurological urgency to build something of their own quietly dims. Not immediately, not dramatically, just gradually. Like a pilot light turning down so slowly you don't notice the room getting colder. That's the first layer of what financial dependency actually does. It doesn't just remove pressure, it removes the productive friction that growth requires. Now let's talk about who this affects and how, because it doesn't look the same for everyone. The first and most visible group is the partner who stopped working entirely. Maybe it was practical at first. Someone had to manage the household. Someone had to be present for the children. Someone had to hold the domestic infrastructure together while the other person built a career. That's a real contribution, and it deserves to be named as one. But here's what happens inside that person, often within 2 to 3 years of complete financial dependence. They stop applying for things, not jobs necessarily, opportunities, ideas, conversations with people who might open doors. They stop raising their hand in rooms where they used to raise it automatically, because somewhere, beneath conscious thought, a quiet recalibration has happened. Their sense of what they're capable of has slowly contracted to fit the space they've been given. And the space they've been given is a domestic one, comfortable, safe, defined. The ambition doesn't disappear overnight. It atrophies, the way a muscle does when it isn't used. The second group is slightly less obvious. These are partners who are still working, but who are financially outpaced by the other person to such a degree that their salary feels symbolic rather than structural. Their salary covers discretionary spending, maybe a personal account, a few subscriptions, some independence at the margins. But the foundation, the rent, the mortgage, the shared accounts, the real weight of the life they share is carried almost entirely by someone else. This person often doesn't identify as financially dependent. They're working, they're contributing, they're present, but the psychological effect is surprisingly similar, because what matters isn't the absolute number. What matters is the perceived necessity of your contribution, and when your contribution could disappear tomorrow without the household noticing, you know it, you feel it, and over time that feeling reshapes what you think you're worth. Not in a dramatic crisis of identity way, in a quiet, cumulative, Tuesday afternoon kind of way. The third group is the one that surprises people. These are the high earners themselves, the providers, the people writing the checks. They pay for it too, just differently. The provider role in a financially imbalanced relationship carries a specific psychological weight that most people in that role have never named out loud. It starts as pride, genuine pride. I can take care of the people I love. That's a meaningful feeling, and it belongs in relationships. But pride over time curdles into something else when it isn't matched. It becomes resentment. Low-grade, well-managed, socially unacceptable resentment that the provider often feels profound guilt about feeling. Because they chose this, because their partner didn't do anything wrong, because this is what love looks like, isn't it? But the resentment is there anyway. In the small moments, when a purchase gets made without consideration, when a risk doesn't get taken, because why would it need to be? When the provider looks across the table at a partner who has stopped striving and feels a loneliness they cannot fully justify. They chose this, and it's costing them something they didn't fully price in. The fourth group is the rarest and the most instructive. These are couples where the financial support was removed, not out of cruelty, not because the relationship ended, but because circumstances shifted. A job loss, a career transition, a deliberate restructuring of how the household operated. And what happened next is the part that almost never makes it into the conversation about money and relationships. The dependent partner grew. Not easily, not immediately, not without real difficulty and fear and friction, but they grew because they had to, because the safety net was gone, and the only direction left was forward. And here is what the people inside those stories report consistently, when they're honest about it. The removal of financial certainty didn't just create income, it created self-concept. It rebuilt something that the dependency had been slowly dissolving. The partner who had spent years convinced they couldn't figure out the money side of life started figuring out the money side of life. They discovered avenues they had never explored because exploring them had never felt necessary. Freelance work, entrepreneurial instincts, skills that had been sitting dormant for years because there had been no structural reason to activate them. The necessity that the comfortable arrangement had quietly removed turned out to be exactly what they needed. Zoom out and the emotional toll of this architecture becomes very clear. Financial dependency, sustained over years, creates a relationship where one person is always slightly more powerful than the other. Both people know it, neither person says it, and the silence around it becomes its own kind of poison. The dependent partner stops being fully honest about their frustrations, because honesty costs more when the other person holds the financial cards. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, even when the hand belongs to someone you love, even when you know they would want you to be honest. The calculus is unconscious, but it's real, and it means that the relationship, which should be the safest place either person has, becomes a place where one person is performing a version of themselves that is smaller and more agreeable than who they actually are. The provider, meanwhile, often starts making unilateral decisions, not out of arrogance, out of a quiet, internalized logic. I'm carrying this, so I should probably steer it. And the relationship that started as a partnership has slowly become something closer to a patronage. One person funds, one person is funded, and both people, underneath whatever warmth still exists between them, feel the wrongness of that arrangement in a place they rarely let themselves look. Here is the shift that matters, and it isn't the one most people expect. The answer is not to immediately withdraw support. That's not the point. The point is this: financial dependency should have a visible horizon. It should be a temporary structure with a stated direction, not a permanent identity that one person inside the relationship quietly inherits. The couples who navigate financial imbalance well are the ones who treat the dependent partner's economic development as a shared project with real stakes, not as a nice-to-have, not as something that will happen eventually when the time is right, as a priority, with structure, with timelines, with genuine accountability. Because here is what the research and the lived experience both confirm. The partner who is pushed, with support, not cruelty, with structure, not abandonment, to develop financial capability of their own, doesn't just bring more money into the relationship. They bring more of themselves, more confidence, more creative risk-taking, more freedom to explore income streams they would never have considered from inside a safety net, more equality in the conversation, more honesty, more presence. The dependency was never just a financial arrangement. It was a ceiling on who that person was allowed to become inside this relationship. And removing it, carefully, collaboratively, with intention, doesn't just change the bank account, it changes the entire shape of the relationship. So here is the real question, and it applies to both people. Are you using financial support to love your partner or to keep them close? Because those two things are not always the same, and the arrangement that feels like security today might be the exact thing quietly costing you both tomorrow. If this landed, share it with someone inside a relationship where the money isn't balanced, not as a weapon, as a mirror, and I'll see you in the next one.